On January 30, 1925, there was a sand cave in Kentucky State, and Floyd Collins, with a kerosene lantern in his hand, entered a 5-foot hole that was very small, so he went forward on his knees and there were sharp stones protruding all around the surface. And he reaches a swayed section which they had dug out a few months ago. It was completely dark and that kerosene lantern was his last hope, and now he reaches the turnaround room. And this was a place where even the experienced ones were reluctant to come. 999 thank you. And they would turn around and go back, and that is why this section was named turn around, because going ahead meant crossing the crab. If we put the squeeze from the 9-inch hole in context, then the lane of this hole was as long as the lane of a 500 milliliters cola bottle, and coming here meant it was going to look exactly like this. Floyd was slowly disappearing into this hole. His clothes were getting torn by the sharp crystals all around and were preventing him from going further. He was pushing himself only with the help of his feet, and now he reaches a wider rope where there was a lace and he had to cross it and go 10 feet down. No. He climbs down tying a rope to the rock, and ahead was the end of the cave and he had to do a job here. He was working on another opening and this place was too small for anyone to fit in. He was going to dig this place and go to the other side where there was a big crystal chamber, and it was going to look something like this. The place was made of a crystal white crystal. A new place like no other in this world. Floyd had been mining rocks here for months and this was a daily routine for him, so Floyd was leaving after doing the work today as usual. Dragging himself as he came in, the wall was so tight that he couldn't even use his hands. And he stops in the middle of the road because his kerosene lantern was dimming, and as he moves a little further, the lantern slips from Floyd's hand and it falls and breaks, and now he was alone in complete darkness. Because the situation had worsened, but he was still relaxed. He was walking alone in the dark 60 feet below, and at that very moment he accidentally hits a loose stone with his foot and the 15-kilogram stone falls on his uncle. He tries to move the stone with his other foot, but there was very little space. The stone fits into his hole. And suddenly more small stones fell on his feet. Floyd was stuck in an awkward position, and no matter how much force he applied, it was impossible to get out. The more he tried to move, the more stones started falling on him and the situation became worse. Sharp stones were digging into his back and the drop plates of ice water were falling straight on his face. Now he had only one option. He had no other option except to shout, call out for help. This is the sand cave, and Floyd was trapped in absolute darkness, that too 60 feet below the ground, and now Floyd's survival race begins. Morning, is me, your host Maru, and you are watching Floyd College Race Engage Time and Survival Party. Explorer is Floyd College. Been trapped in Sand King. The Cullens were negotiating a small cave tunnel when they were pinned by fallen rocks and debris at 10 a.m. on Friday morning. So far the authors have been unsuccessful. Floyd B. June was born in 1887 in Logan, Quantick, Kentucky, and Floyd's cave exploring career began at just 6 years old. And he was very passionate about caves since childhood. He used to cave for hours every day, and in fact sometimes he used to sleep in the cave, and due to this he discovered a new cave in 1917. On his father's farmland, and now he got involved. Kentucky Cave Wars. Kentucky Cave Wars, if I put it simply. This is a huge network of interconnected cave, and it is probably the world's largest cave system, and in the middle of it there is a city named Cave City, and this entire area is private property with dozens of cave, and because of this farming cannot take place here, and cave tourism as a source of income becomes a prominent thing here. So the problem is that there are more cabs here, but less people, so obviously the competition increases here, and so does Floyd. After discovering his cab, he advertises it thoroughly, but people still do not come to his cab because there was no uniqueness in his cab. So Floyd later discovers another cab on someone else's private property. And there was an agreement between the landowner and him that 50% share in the profit was to be divided among them, and now the cave had to be made attractive so that more and more people come here, and because the location of the cave was also very good. It was just 100 yards away from the cave, and it also had a uniqueness. There was a chamber in this sand cave which was made of gypsum crystals. And it looked comparatively more beautiful than the other cabs, but it was very difficult to get to the place, and Floyd had been working for months to find a way around it. Floyd spent 12 hours a day moving rocks around in the cab to find the place, and eventually it got stuck on January 30, 1925, the same day it was going to get stuck. The same day he finds the crystal chamber. It was something. He stares at the chamber for hours as he was the first person in history to visit this place. He was excited to tell his family about this discovery. But God had something else in store for him. Well, while returning, he gets badly stuck at a depth of 60 feet. Where it was not possible to even move, he was screaming in complete darkness, and after getting tired, he stopped for a while and then slept for a while, and then after waking up again, he screamed again. But there was no one to hear his voice, and how did he keep screaming for 23 hours in this darkness? The whole day and night of January 30th passed, but no one was there to hear him. He was lucky. 2 of the property owners came to the entrance and a son came with him. Jewel saw Floyd's coat and hat hanging outside the house. So he goes a little inside and calls out to Floyd, but doesn't get any response from Floyd, so he goes a little further inside and reaches the turnaround section where the squeeze hole was and yells from there, and then he hears Floyd's yelling from inside the squeeze hole. Because the cab was on the highway, a crowd of people had gathered and Homer was Floyd Collins' younger brother, and before Floyd got in the cab, Floyd had already asked Homer to come with him, but Homer refused. But now Homer was desperate to get his brother out of there somehow. Homer desperately gets into the cab and crosses the squeeze area. There were scratches from the rough surface, but he ignores them all and rushes to Floyd, and soon Homer's feet touch Floyd's face. But things were not right here. The situation was getting worse, and the situation was such that Floyd was here and the rocks were pressing down on his uncle, and he was surrounded by small rocks of heavy weight. And there were mountains of small rocks on top of it which were ready to fall because the opening was very small, so there were only 2 options. Homer had to come down with his feet first, but he could not even touch Book Floyd with this. His body was stopping him. Option 2 is if Homer goes head first, but he will get access, but he will have to move more than 100 kilograms of stones in an upside-down position. And the problem was that there is very little space here. So first Floyd is fed a lot of sandwiches, and he is also given a lot of coffee to keep him warm. Floyd tells Homer he has finally seen the crystal chamber and says that if he gets out of here, he will never come back to this place again. Now Homer gets down to work. Homer spends the next 8 hours in an upside-down position and removes the stones from here. With the help of this scan, and the way he was pushing the stone, more stones were coming down from above and accumulating near Floyd, and all his efforts were going waste. Homer did as much as he could, but he too got exhausted in the small space. This made him feel speechless, and eventually he too got out of the cab. And when he came out, he was surprised to see that more than 100 people were watching this spectacle outside and were talking very stupid things among themselves, that if they went inside the cabin, they would be able to save Floyd very easily, and they were talking about many other logical things. The news of Floyd's tragedy had spread like wildfire, and a lot of reporters were trying to interview Homer, and they wanted to know about Floyd, but Homer was upset. He was not interested in giving interviews to anybody. Dozens of people from outside go inside the cab, and when they get to the turnaround section where the 9-inch squeeze hole was, they are horrified and turn back. So there was a reporter named William Miller who was trying to interview Homer, but Homer didn't need a reporter. He needed a friend to help him. He angrily tells the reporter, "Listen, if you want more information, then why didn't you go into the hole and look for you?" And do you know, William Miller agrees after hearing this. Yes, he enters the cave with a kerosene lantern, and as soon as he enters, there is a little bit of water on the floor of the cave because the people outside were very smart people and they were lighting bonfires outside to save themselves from the cold, without knowing what damage it will cause inside the cave. Miller also gets scared seeing this quiz hole in the turnaround section, but if he doesn't dare to go inside, then he will also be in the same category as everyone else. So he enters the 9-inch hole, and despite there being sharp stones inside, he reaches Floyd and tries to interview him. I can't believe that he was interviewing Floyd even in this situation. But Floyd was in no condition to respond, and now he was also lying in the cold ice water. Basically he was dying. Miller could not do anything here, and he also comes out of the shed. Homer is happy to see Miller outside, because Miller was the only one who had the courage to go inside, otherwise everyone else was like that, and now there were 2 people who were helping Floyd in the rescue. Floyd's news was published in full detail in the newspaper, and its report became a nationwide story. Updates of the story were published in thousands of local and national newspapers, and people were getting updates on it every hour through radio. The story was spreading across America, and everyone had only one question: when will Floyd Collins come out? Till now the 3rd character in this story is Robert Worden, and this was the 3rd character who met Robert after crossing this quiz, and his plan was to tie Floyd's body with a rope and drag it. Floyd was still unconscious. His eyes were opening and sometimes closing. Robert somehow puts on a belted jacket and gives him coffee to drink and food, and also gives him a tablet which will reduce the pain and make him feel relaxed, and all 3, Homer, Miller, Robert, hold the rope, and now it is going to happen. Tug of war cave versus 3 men, and the winner will get the victory. Floyd. And there were 3 more men behind the rope who were helping to pull it, So there were 6 men pulling the rope and Floyd was stuck. In this way, the rope was pulling him, and in this way his body was getting compressed by the ceiling and he could have died. Floyd was screaming in pain. He was begging to stop. Stop, stop, it's going to pull me into 2 parts. There was no progress. Floyd was only getting pain. In the tug of war, all 3 of them had lost and Cave had won. Tired and exhausted, Miller goes back to his village and there he reports on it in detail, and his articles become famous in a very short time, due to which Floyd Collins had now become a national news. After this, Miller returns to sand and sees that someone has put light bulbs inside the cave, and Miller takes one of those bulbs and ties it to Floyd's corner so that he can keep getting warmth, and Miller tells Floyd that thousands of people outside have come to know about you and everyone is praying for you. If you have something to say, then say it. Floyd was stuck here for 100 hours. Or he says through the newspaper, I believe I would go to heaven. I can feel that I am going to be taken out alive with both my fits. I kept thinking what would happen if they raw me would fall. I kept thinking to try my mind to do something else, but it wasn't much use. I couldn't do much to help those who came to help me. But I knew that a lot of people we are willing to do all in there, and it gave me courage. Tuesday morning I thought to be myself for days down here, and no closer freedom that I was on the first day. What it will be, and will I get out? I couldn't think of it. I have finished death before. It would not frighten me, but it is so long. The flirt had spread all over the country by now and everyone was talking about it. People of the country were praying in churches, and even the President of the US was taking an interest in it, and it had become the 3rd largest non-political story between World War I and World War II. The crowd of people outside the cab had increased from 1,000 to 10,000. All the hotels around cabin are booked and the restaurants run out of food. There was so much crowd that people there even opened a light version of Wuyo. People living in the nearby houses were letting visitors sleep on the floor of their houses for $10 to 10. Even Bata was putting up beds and letting people sleep there. Yes, I am not kidding. This really happened. More than 4,000 vehicles were parked outside the cave. This is the car of Michael, superintendent of the company, within a radius of 1 mile. He had come to rescue Floyd on behalf of the government, and he had brought some rescue team and military people with him. And the car was nothing like Homer's rescue study. So the first thing they do is survey the entire cafe and find out that there were thousands of people outside the cafe, and the movement of all the people could cause the cafe to collapse, and by now small loose stones had started falling inside the cafe. And there was a person in Carl Michael's team, KC Jose, who crosses this squeeze area inside the cave and reaches Floyd, where Floyd was shouting for help, and by then near the turnaround section small stones started falling and suddenly the ceiling started falling even faster, and KC now wanted to go back. But Floyd starts saying that I am very thirsty, and Cassie comes closer to Floyd and starts giving him coffee, but then Floyd turns his head and refuses to drink the coffee, and by this point Cassie realizes what is going on here. Flood actually wasn't asking for a drink. Flood knew that he was trapped here for 5 days and it was very difficult for him to get out of here, and now he had become completely selfish. He knew that he was going to be trapped in the scale forever, and he didn't want to be the only one trapped here. No, as soon as someone understands this, he immediately turns around and starts running and somehow reaches the final squeeze. Stones were falling all around him and he somehow manages to get out, and then everyone outside watches the cave collapse together. And the only route that could reach Floyd was completely blocked. Forever. This meant there were only 2 options. Option 1. Give up. Option 2. Dig from above and make a new hole directly near Floyd. Floyd could not even imagine the level and scale of the operation going on 55 feet above him. Carmichael had high-tech machinery. Many professional groups from the city were working on it, and now it had become a professionally organized rescue mission. Everyone had to work here as fast as they could. They were experienced people and they had to dig 55 feet deep inside the ground, so for this they did some calculations. There were total 75 people in the rescue and they could search 2 feet every hour, so they had to dig total 55 feet, so it was going to take roughly 30 hours. But the question was, could Floyd survive for that long? So yes, absolutely. He can survive this way. They start digging and Michael knew that this was a race against time, and these 2 guys were working to their full capacity, and Michael had lined up many more guys behind them, and if these 2 guys were even a little slow they would be replaced by these 2 new guys. Slowly the overall progress starts flowing. Interestingly, there were so many people outside the cave that if Floyd had seen it himself, he would not have believed it, and practically everything was going on here. There was a Ferris wheel, food stalls, families and church people were picnicking here in groups. Some nearby liquor makers were also selling liquor here. And in fact some people were smuggling trucks here and there was a bloody juggler here who was swinging the ball. If I tell all these things in simple words, then a fair had been organized here, and now here comes a twist in the story. The thing was that people in actuality did not know how Floyd was trapped in actuality, and newspapers were also not helping much in this matter. So the obvious question was why Floyd has not come out yet? And rumors start spreading about this. He didn't even want to have him rescued at all. The other one says he to all are doing for publicity. I think Floyd has not been trapped at all, and the rumor spreads even more badly. I heard that Floyd comes out at night. And during the day he goes back, and other people say I had Floyd and someone murdered him. This whole thing is a fraud. There is fraud going on here, and it was not easy for Homer to stop such rumors, and even some people form groups and start doing crazy things. A group of 3 people go to a telegraph office. And one of them pretends to be Floyd, and they send a telegram to Floyd's mother. His mother, who had already passed away several years ago. Please give a contractual statement that, I'm worried, all I'll send till mother, I'm alright and I'm coming home. Barker was busy digging the ground, and he was trying to speed up his work by using various jugaad. But things had gone wrong. The speed of people's work had reduced a lot. They were able to dig only 4 inches in 1 hour. But the question was, would Floyd still be alive? The light that was put on Floyd's collar to keep him warm also comes, and the bulb was being powered by a simple copper wire, and an engineer connected the radio amplifier to that copper wire. See, when Floyd was breathing, his chest was expanding and contracting, which was causing fluctuations in the copper wire, and its reading was directly sent to the radio amplifier and was consistently detecting Floyd's breathing pattern, and this was the proof that Floyd was alive. So all the workers kept working and kept working. The original estimate was only for 30 hours, but it had taken 144 hours by now, and they had dug only 44 feet, and then it started raining, and in fact it was not just raining. Hail was falling in the cold, and there were chances of the hole created by it collapsing. By now it had been 15 days since Floyd was stranded, and now the excitement among the people had reduced, and newspapers had also lost interest in it. Visitors were leaving, but some people still had hopes, and then that light bulb stopped burning, and now the reading could not even tell whether Floyd was a Jinnah or not. The 16th of February, 1:30 Monday, finally a 55 feet hole was made and the cave was opened, and it was like a human being could survive in it like this for 17 days. 12 days without food, 12 days without water, and the light bulb from which the light was coming had been switched off 4 days ago. Everyone goes into silence after seeing this. Homer turns on the torch and looks at Floyd. Floyd's mouth was open. One of his gold teeth was shining, but he was dead. Everyone comes out and gives the news to the rest of the people. Dead Floyd is no more. According to the reporter, he had died 3 days ago. The day the light bulb stopped working, he would have survived for only 1 day after that. If these people had reached 3 days earlier, Floyd could have been saved, so the sand was on the verge of collapsing again. That is why Floyd's body is not taken out and is kept there and sealed. The next day Floyd's family holds a funeral for Floyd at their home, but there were no visitors yet. But you know the story was yet to get more interesting. The owner of the sand cave was no less of a scoundrel. He puts up a signboard outside the sand cave which reads, "Come on visitors, take a look, only 50 cents per visitor." They turned Floyd into a tourist attraction, and the authorities responsible for the rescue broke the deal with the burglars and didn't pay the poor guys anything for digging the hole, and they had to move back in. William Miller gets the prize in 1926 for his good reporting, and Homer wanted a lot of money. To get Floyd's body out of the cave, he was collecting donations by telling the crowd on stage the detailed story of the rescue. It had a mission: to get Floyd out. Keep thinking of Floyd lying in the mood where he had suffered beyond our power to imagine. I would never have peace of mind if he remained there. So after several months, Homer has the money. 17th of April 1927, Homer and his team start digging the ground, and they complete the job in just a week. They first remove his uncle's stone and then take his body out where Floyd gets fresh air. A few days later, Floyd is buried in a coffin in his mother's place. But the story does not end here, rather the story becomes more interesting from here. After 2 years, the Coolidge family was facing a major financial issue, and at the same time a dentist comes there. Dr. Harry B. Thomas, and he offers to sell his land to them. "Sell this property to me and I will give you $10,000? But Homer did not want to sell it. Floyd's father Lee Collin was a bit of an alcoholic, and he became greedy for money, and without thinking, he sold his land. But Thomas came up with another agreement and it said that everything to this property belongs to Thomas. This means that everything here was going to be Thomas's, and then after buying that land, Thomas took out Floyd's body and kept it in a glass coffin for showcase, and Thomas also had a cave, so he kept Floyd's body in that cave. So, till now the piece had become more popular than the cave. That means wherever its body was, visitors would come to see it frequently. Simply put, Floyd's body itself had become a tourist attraction, and Thomas had turned his failure into a successful business through this. And obviously the Coolidge's family feels bad seeing Floyd's body being misused like this, and they even file a case in the court for this. But since there was an agreement with Thomas, they lose this case. And this is how Thomas's business runs for 2 years. But one night on the 19th of March 1929, 2 people come into Thomas's cab and steal Floyd's body and go away. Floyd's body is found later in the bushes of a forest, but Floyd's leg, due to which he was stuck in the cab, had been cut off. Someone had stolen that leg of his. And nobody knows who those 2 thieves were. At that time the caving industry was very competitive, so it is possible that someone from the industry might have stolen Floyd's body and kept his legs as souvenirs. But there is no proof of this, and it is possible that Floyd's body might have been stolen by his family, but there is no proof of this either. So we can't say anything. Poor Floyd, while making the cab attractive, had itself become a tourist attraction for visitors. Whichever cab his body was put in, that cab was becoming successful. Due to this, Floyd's cab is now kept in a metal box and is tied with a chain and locked, and now Floyd had become more trapped than ever. Later, a decade later, in 1989, Floyd's cave was purchased by the National Park Service, and Floyd's cave was closed permanently and a steel gate was placed at its entrance. But the family was still objecting to all this, and finally Floyd was taken out of the cave and buried back in the church cemetery. After 64 years, they finally found peace, and you know what is the most unique thing about Floyd's story? Floyd spent many months building that coffin with his own hands, and finally he was buried there. Or rather, he dug his own grave. Have you heard another saying, history never repeats what it rhymes? People are still the same as they were before. John Edward Jones went 400 feet inside the cave and spent 27 hours stuck in the upside-down position and finally breathed his last, and the similarity is that John's body was buried in that cave forever, and that cave has also been sealed forever. So now the documentary ends here. Until now the greatest, so it was compulsory for me to cover their story in detail, and that's why this video has become a bit long and has been uploaded a bit late, and you guys tell in the comment whether this was the video or not, and if you like the video then please do subscribe. We are very close to 1,000 subscribers. And thank you for subscribing, you all are great, and special thank you Lucas for writing your articles on Floyd, calling you are a brilliant writer.